Welcome to Let's Talk Justice. I am Jade Williams joining you in studio, and I should hope my co-host is joining us on Zoom.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ. And of course, customary, we have to say thank you to our listeners for tuning in on the Bridge 99 website, the Bridge 99 radio waves, and for those who are joining us via the JFJ YouTube platform. Thanks again so much. We appreciate you always.
All right. So we will go straight into our program for today. I just want to say though, Mikel, looking quite lovely. Is it because you're on Zoom today? Why you're looking so great today?
I take the compliment, but I've been awake since 6 o'clock in a meeting from 6:30. So I'm happy that the eye bags and the shadows and so on not showing. But thanks.
Yeah, but you're doing well for yourself today. Well, I'll say that today's topic, we are focused on the constitutional reform process, and we are talking about citizens and the constitution, education and engagement in the reform process. And once we get into the topic more fulsomely, we will be joined by Mr. Wayne Robertson, JP, and Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Before we do so, though, I think Michael would have our customary recap from last week.
So I'm not a sports fan, but I think last week was a beautiful week for Jamaica. We all huddled together and we watched Sharika Jackson, Shelley and Fraser Price and the others who really did us proud in securing those medals. And for those who came very, very close, it was a good week for Jamaica on the international platform. And I think, as usual, sports is one of those activities that really bring us together. And after the World Championships, I saw persons online saying, how can Jamaica invest a little bit more, not only on that international stage, but for those who are not aware, when we talk about helping inner city youth, unattached youths within the inner city communities, the at-risk communities, sporting activities are one of those activities that we really utilize to help with conflict resolution. And I have to bring it right back to the work. It helps with conflict resolution. It helps with that kind of unity within the communities. So again, through the Chase Fund, perhaps the Ministry of Gender and Sports and Entertainment, we hope to see a little bit more effort with those types of initiatives. I know it has been going on for years, but we need to really invest a little bit more with the youths and so on. Now, one of the things last week as well that jumped out at me, and Minister of Education, the Honorable Favour Williams, indicated that the national school grooming policy, there will be a draft that will be submitted to schools for their review sometime in September. And for those who are not aware of what it entails, one of the biggest areas of injustice, given our Afrocentric features as Black people, as well as religious practices rather, is that Rastafarians, for example, they often are told you have to wear tams when you're going to school, which quite frankly is an affront to their freedom of expression. And the minister spoke quite strongly against this practice, saying that she has visited schools, and it's something I know has been in the works for some time now. So we're quite happy that a draft will be submitted. But I think it needs to go a step further, because outside of the Rastafarian community, respectfully, I think as Black people, we need to celebrate our Blackness without it being tied to religion as a reason for saying you don't need to wear tams. For those with the sister locks and the hair twist and so on, I think we need an opportunity to go to schools, put our afro out, maybe a little ribbon around it, and look quite good just at the same time as those who are from other ethnic groups. So good first step to the Minister of Education, but I think it needs to go a little step.
Okay, I think we had a bit of an issue just now with our connections, a bit of dropout in the studio, so we've lost Mikkel in her monologue. I hope she has not lost her place when we get her back. In the meantime, we can do our right of the day as we wait on her to reconnect. Yes, so our right of the day today is coming from our International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and it speaks to our right to public participation or to participate in public affairs, which is a right that is mirrored in our Constitution. We discussed it a couple of episodes ago, but this right in our international sphere allows for a citizen to have the opportunity without any distinctions, and it says those mentioned in Article 2, which are the characteristics that we normally refer to people: race, gender, ethnicity, so on. And without any unreasonable restrictions, to take part in the conduct of public affairs directly or through freely chosen representatives, to vote and to be elected at genuine periodic elections, and for that vote to be universal and have equal suffrage amongst all the population, to have access on general terms of equality to public service in his country. So that is a right to participate in public affairs. And we'll quickly do our trivia question for today, which asks which section of the Constitution of Jamaica establishes the office of the Governor General. So which section of the Constitution creates the office of the Governor General? And you can respond to that through our WhatsApp at 2397583 or on our Instagram pages at JA for Justice or our Twitter at JA for Justice. I hope Mikel is back with us now. No? Okay, so we are still having a challenge bringing Mikel back. So I will go into our script for today. Normally she would be on to read the script with me, but I'm not seeing her, so we'll go straight. So in March of this year, the substantive process began on the reform of Jamaica's constitution with the naming of the committee that would oversee that reform process. Since it began, the process has had to be adapted to better meet the needs of citizens intended to participate in it and respond to calls for a process that allows for greater accountability. And we know that that is something we've already discussed on the show. We've had several episodes where this was a point of discussion: public participation in the constitutional reform process and what that means. I think Mikel is back with us now. Yes, Mikel?
Yes, I'm back. JPS decided today was the day.
Yes, it was for everyone. We had a little challenge here as well.
Okay.
Yes, I know you were going through your recap. Did you have any point you wanted to finish?
I'm not sure where I got cut off, but just to indicate that we're really hoping for a fulsome national school grooming policy that encapsulates our Blackness in its entirety and not just tethered to the religious aspect. And there's some other things we will be touching on towards the end of the program, Jade. The matter of the Buggery Act, again, I think it needs revisiting. And our gender-based violence tour, just to recap a little bit around that towards the end of the program.
Absolutely. So while we were cut off, I was filling the space by reading our script in the first paragraph there. So we are at the second paragraph speaking about the ministry's commitment to ensuring that there are now accessible avenues for increased public education and participation in the constitutional reform process, which would include the provision of materials such as the minutes from these committee meetings, as well as an increase in in-person engagement. So we've seen some of those, like the town halls that have been planned around the country, that would allow for greater understanding of the citizen of the committee's considerations.
Continue, Jade. My eyesight is not the best.
So while these efforts are great, there is still a need to unpack several sections of the process. So chief among those considerations is the new head of state. So while we know that a referendum is needed for that process to be undergone, what does that mean for the regular citizen? How do we unpack what a referendum is and how that will affect us? How can we increase our understanding of the varying presidential models that are being considered prior to the referendum being called to ensure our fulsome participation? And what are the new avenues for public education and engagement? And how can we access them as citizens? So that's a lot of things for us to unpack today. And as we said earlier, we'd be joined by Mr. Wayne Robertson, who is on, as I'm being told by our producers, who is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Mr. Robinson?
Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Good
And thank you
afternoon,
for
Mr.
joining us.
Robertson. Thank you so much for
Let me
joining.
say good afternoon to all Jamaicans, whether
Yes.
you're here on soil or in the diaspora. Good afternoon, everyone.
Perfect. And by the way, Bridge 99, they do have a strong listenership overseas. So I trust they're listening in, and I know they have some questions about how the diaspora can participate and voting rights and so on. So another conversation, that part of it, but we are certainly happy that you are joining us. Before we get started, Permanent Secretary, on the matters of constitutional reform, we were out in the community and we were asking people what their thought processes were. And they said, what is the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs? Is when that ministry pop up. So I'm not sure if you can just give a quick summary of that ministry and what the objectives entail.
So let me first of all thank you profoundly for inviting me to speak about the very important matter of constitutional reform. We consider this a very important part of our duties, and it is important that we educate the public using various fora. With respect to the ministry itself, the ministry was established in January of last year, and simply put, the ministry is responsible for looking and improving the ministries, the whole of government legal infrastructure. So we're seeking to improve efficiency as it relates to law reform. What does that entail? That entails examining the business process. So what we did early in the day last year was to make a submission to Cabinet, which proposed the establishment of a projectized approach. We have also established ministry legislative teams in all ministries, and what that requires is for each ministry to treat each law reform as a project. So you scope it. Are there 3 amendments? If so, if you're repealing or replacing, as we did with the Bail Act, you should expressly state that. Everything must be time-bound in terms of comments from stakeholders, and when will the process ultimately be brought to the Governor General for assent. So everything is time-bound and it's projectized. So we're looking at improving the efficiencies as it relates to law reform. We're also looking at how we can improve overall efficiency in terms of drafting of bills. We also, more importantly, have a responsibility to reform the Constitution of Jamaica. And that includes the rewriting of the Constitution. And of course, we will have those discussions later on with respect to the role of the Constitutional Reform Committee. We also have a very important duty to protect the rights of all Jamaicans, even those who are most vulnerable in our society. Chapter 3 of our Constitution, the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, encompass all of our inalienable rights. And so we have commenced discussions, we have had conversations with various stakeholders. We have actually started that program of educating Jamaicans on their rights. And I should also add that the Human Rights Division has partnered with the Legal Education Division in the ministry to embark on a robust program of educating not just wider Jamaica, but ministries, departments, and agencies.
Okay.
We start closer to home, but we're expanding across the board.
Thank you so much for that, PS. I'm going to ask you to stay with us while we take a quick break, and we'll be back with some more questions for you. Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing citizens and the Constitution, education and engagement in the reform process. And we are joined by Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Mr. Wayne Robertson. Michael, I don't know
I
if
think
you...
we can delve straight into the topic at hand, constitutional reform.
Yes.
Yes, so one of the things, PS, we had the terms of reference earlier this year, and we had highlighted that three-phase process. And, you know, there would have been several concerns, and I know the ministry would have also acknowledged that perhaps we need to rethink some of the timeline. If you could just highlight to the listeners what the revised rollout process is, what phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 entails going forward.
All right, thanks, Ms. Jackson. And again, thank you for providing us with this opportunity to educate all Jamaicans. It's very important, and we take it very seriously. So the program has three phases, right? That has not changed. The first phase includes the repatriation of the Constitution, abolition of the constitutional monarchy, and the establishment, more importantly, of the Republic of Jamaica, including all matters within the deeply entrenched provision of the Constitution, for which a referendum is required to amend. Now, phase 2 includes a review of ordinarily entrenched provisions of the Constitution, for which amendments are desired and required. And of course, very importantly, that phase will see us doing substantive work on the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, Chapter 3 of the Constitution. And just recently, we have had various submissions in respect of the CCJ matter. It is likely that that will be looked at during phase 2. With respect to phase 3, there will be full assessment of the nation's legal and constitutional infrastructure to facilitate the putting together of a new constitution. Now, as I said earlier, there are still three phases, but the timeline for the tabling of the bill has been revised. We are now working to table and pass the bill during this life of Parliament. So that is still on. Minister will make a statement in the House very, very soon, and more information will be provided.
And just to clarify, Minister, not Minister Pierce, there are a couple language that you used, and I know throughout the program we have touched on them. Special entrenched provisions, those are two. And for our listeners, when we say life of Parliament, we're talking about when the general election is constitutionally due, which is sometime in 2025. If you could just clarify those three aspects for the listeners.
The life of Parliament?
Yes, when the general election is constitutionally due, if that's what you're referring to.
The election is constitutionally due in 2025.
Yes.
And of course, as I said earlier, we intend to table and pass the bill during this life of Parliament. That is still the intention, of course, subject to general elections. We do not know the date of the general elections, so I cannot state anything more than that.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, I know that's one of the areas, for example, some persons have indicated maybe we should change it and have a fixed election date. But specially entrenched PS and entrenched provisions, just quickly, you touched on it earlier. Specially entrenched in phase 1, what does that mean? Entrenched in phase 2, what does that mean? What provisions are we talking?
So simply deeply entrenched provisions require a referendum. And so referendum is simply a vote. And we put it to the people for the people to decide.
And that entails the Republic, anything else?
That entails the Republic, transitioning for Republic to a Republic. There are also matters concerning the life of Parliament that we also have to consider. I should also add that the matter concerning the final appellate court is not a deeply entrenched provision.
And that's one of the entrenched ones that 2/3 majority vote.
So what we are focusing on now is the transition to a republic, including the form of presidency. That is the emphasis during phase 1. And so we'll have to go to the people for a referendum, which is simply a vote.
Okay, over to you, Jade.
Yes, so I wondered if you could, for our listeners, demystify some of the considerations of the presidential models that we might be implementing going forward. I think I heard the minister mention two of them. So I don't know if you would like to clarify for our listeners what those models would entail. And then I have a follow-up question.
All right, thanks for the opportunity for that. So let me state what we are considering, because nothing has yet been finalized. I must point that out, right? So we're looking at one, whether the president should be the formal head of state, which is separate from the prime minister, who is head of government, right? So there's a separation there in terms of the roles. You do have other models which look at the president being both head of state and head of government, and therefore has all the executive powers. USA, Indonesia, and South Korea are just three examples. Now, with respect to the hybrid approach, which our minister has spoken about during a town hall meeting, it is really a parliamentary cabinet type system, right? And of course, we have heard various voices. We have heard the public has been very strong on that matter of the election of the president. And what we are hearing, people want to elect their president directly. We are hearing that, but it's not a settled position. We have taken note of that. I should also use this opportunity to indicate that we are putting together all the issues that have been articulated by and ventilated by members of the public. We'll be publishing that in the print media very, very soon. So you can look out for that. And we're saying really to the public, we have heard your voices. These are the issues that we have documented. These are the proposals. What additional concerns, issues can you proffer? And so we are going to that extent to ensure that we share that with the public and to pull other information, proposals that may come from the public.
All right.
So before you go ahead, Pace.
Those are very important considerations. Now, we have noted that, and the research has indicated very clearly that where the powers are enveloped in one office, that's the executive powers, ceremonial powers, it's more of an authoritarian type system. And so we do not have any experience with regards to that type of regime. So we're very cautious about going in that direction. But that is what the research is showing, that we have to be careful how we vest all powers into one office.
Okay, thank you for that, Pace. I think Mikhail wanted to say something, and then I have
I just wanted to just give a little background information as Pace was talking about the election of the president, that in the 1990s, for example, there was the suggestion and the agreement, I believe, that the president would be so nominated by members of the House. And when we talk about the election of the president, that is what people are saying. I don't want any parliamentarian to nominate my president. I think I should have a say, a voice in who is representing us as head of state. So that's a little bit of background info. I recall at the time, former Bruce Golding spoke very strongly, former Prime Minister Bruce Golding spoke very strongly on this particular era. So as we have the conversation, I will try and jump in at specific times just to give what the discussions were of the 90s, so we can get a sense of what people are rejecting. I say, no, we're not more educated on the issues, and we should have a say in some matters. So just wanted to plug that.
All right. Thank you, Mikhail, for that additional context. You know, as we're talking about what is being considered in terms of the presidential model, I heard you speak about the hybrid, and I wondered how that would differ from how the role of that president in the hybrid system would differ from the current powers and role of the governor general, or current governor general under the constitution. So I don't know if you could elaborate on some of the functions of the governor general now and how those would differ to that of the president under the hybrid system.
Well, I don't want to get too much into the hybrid system because remember now that is subject to further rigor and rigorous research and consultations,
Sure.
and there's no settled position. But I'll try my best to answer. So, as it relates to the Governor General, of course, carries out roles and functions in relation to our democratic governance structure. And based on Section 32 of the Constitution, establishes the rules governing the exercise of the Governor General's functions. So, among the responsibilities, I will just summarize, are the appointments and swearing in of the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, Cabinet Ministers, the Attorney General, the Chief Justice, President of the Court of Appeal, and other members of the Judiciary. The Governor General also appoints members of the Services Commission, namely the Public Service Commission and the Police Service Commission, and on the advice of the Commission, the Public Service decides on the recommendations in respect of appointments. These commissions, of course, are well known, so I won't necessarily go too much into that. But there are other important appointments that are executed by the Governor General. Those include that of Privy Councillors, the Custos Rotulorum of each parish, the Chief of Defence Staff, the Public Defender, the Political Ombudsman, which has now been abolished, that was previously done, and of course the Commissioner of Indicom. Now, the Governor General has a close working relationship with the Prime Minister, of course, and convenes regular meetings and other critical briefings are given with respect to cabinet minutes. So, in essence, the Governor General carries out certain critical executive roles, but also there are ceremonial powers and duties vested in that office. Of course, with respect to the National Honors and Awards, the Governor General has to be, the main person there, handing out the awards and provides presents at the ceremonial opening of Parliament. So those are just two examples.
I'm going to ask you to pause there. We're going to take our break, and when we come back, I'll just ask you to finish that thought, and then I think we have a few more questions for you before we end. Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are joined by Wayne Robertson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, and we are discussing the topic Citizens and the Constitution. Before the break, PS, you were giving us, I think you were about to go into the comparative part of the role of the Governor General now versus what is envisioned for a possible hybrid system in our future.
Before PS answers, PS said, I didn't hear you touch on the lawmaking part, the legislative functions of the Governor General.
Yeah, so I wasn't finished. Yeah,
Yes.
so very important, for the avoidance of doubt, the Governor General gives assent to all bills which become law ultimately. So that's a very important duty of the Governor General. So once the Governor General gives assent, it becomes law. And that is very important.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think Jade's follow-up question, PS, if and I know you can't get into the nitty-gritty of what this proposed president would be looking like, but for those who are listening in and unsure of the options, one of the concerns I have personally is that when we talk about the president, I don't think we're giving people a fulsome understanding of what this proposed model may entail if we're talking about a non-executive president as head of state. Could we see some of these powers that the current Governor General model having been transferred to this presidential model?
Yes, thank you for that, Ms. Jackson. In fact, I must indicate that there is no final decision on the model. We are still at the point of consulting with the wider public, and research has been rigorous. We have different models that we have assessed and we have studied, but as it relates to those executive powers currently vested in the office of the Governor General, those powers simply can be transferred to the office of the President, because there are critical roles that would have to continue. Those duties would have to continue. I mentioned before the break that there are sensitive appointments to various commissions of Parliament, for example. I mentioned other offices. Those cannot be abolished. They will have to be vested in an office. And so even when we transition from a constitutional monarchy to a republic and establish, for example, office of the president is likely to still carry out those very important roles and responsibilities. Very important executive, because it's unlikely that it will go elsewhere. Now, if we're thinking about different models, and if it's one person with all the powers, which I did mention the caveat there, the caution, in terms of the autocratic nature of those democracies, those states which are not necessarily democratic states. We have to be cautious with vesting all the powers in one office. But yes, those executive functions are critical and simply cannot just go away.
Yes. And thank you, Pierce. And to put in
And the
context,
ceremonial
Absolutely.
duties are also very important and must be carried out. Yes.
To put in context, sometimes when you hear about Commission of Parliament, for example, being independent of Parliament, when you have the Governor General and hopefully this new president having such duties, it creates that sense of accountability and transparency that is independent of the parliamentarians as they provide oversight. How they're appointed, some of these members,
Yes.
the various Commission of Parliament. PS don't have to comment here, but for example, the whole matter that's happening with Integrity Commission, when you have the Governor General appointing the commissioners and so on, it creates that safeguard to ensure that the hiring and the firing of these critical bodies is not done by the parliamentarians themselves, but someone who is above the fray, so to speak. So just to put in context with that example, given it's a topical one.
Thank you, Brad. Yes.
Yes, thank you for that, Mikhail. I kind of just wanted to shift gears a little, as the PS mentioned, consultation with the public on what they would want going forward. I wanted to know, in terms of public engagement and public participation, what are our new avenues for that engagement? I know that the town halls are part of it. Are there any other structured events like that are planned, and how can we access the committee or even the ministry to get our views to the committee for consideration? So what would that process look like for an ordinary citizen?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So we will continue with town hall meetings. We have also, while we're in the various parishes, we take the opportunity to meet with various stakeholder groups. We call it focus group sessions, where we meet with community development representatives. We meet with the members of the Ministers Fraternal, service clubs, which includes Lions, Rotary, Kiwanis. We meet with justices of the peace. We meet with all stakeholders who are desirous of attending. So we do have focus group sessions in the parishes, but at the same time, we go further by having town hall meetings. So that will continue as we roll out the program. We have also established our website, roadtorepublic.mlca.gov.jm. We have also created an email address, constitutionalreform@mlca.gov.jm. We have also introduced our WhatsApp number, which we have also shared with members of the public in those sessions. We have published an advertisement in the newspaper requesting all Jamaicans to make submissions to the Constitutional Reform Committee. That is a massive one, because we take this matter very seriously about hearing from the public. And what we have seen after that publication is that persons have also written to us asking to make submissions. Members of the public have made, individuals have come in to the meetings to make submissions. For example, Carvel Stewart has come in. He had actually emailed us with his recommendations and suggestions, and he was invited to the CRC for for a meeting, and he made a submission. We did the same for Haile Mikhail Kojo, who presented minister with the copy of a constitution which he created
Yes, I
in
read it.
Mandeville. We have also
Yes.
invited other stakeholder groups, the Jamaican Bar Association, the Advocates Network, the National Democratic Movement, and we will continue that process of allowing persons to come in to make submissions. So we are saying to you, send us your submissions, send us your concerns, your proposals, email them to us. We will review, and we have actually documented all the submissions that we have received thus far, and they have been reviewed as well, not just documented but reviewed. So we will continue with that process of opening our doors, and we also live stream our submissions. All the submissions to date have been live streamed. And so we will continue that process. So if any member of the public feels strongly about a particular matter which touch on concern or constitution, we are kindly asking that you contact us. You can email constitutionalreform@mlca.gov.jm.
And PS, do you have a flyer with even a social?
Yes, I can share that with you. We do have one on our social media page. I'm going to kindly ask you and your listeners to follow us, MLCA.gov.jm. That's MLCA.gov.jm. Follow us, like us, Instagram, share where necessary. We try our best to upload quite a bit of information to our pages. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, and of course our Road to Republic website is also up and running, including the ministry's website. All right, so we have also published our minutes on those websites. So we are trying our best to ensure that we are transparent and we are not hiding anything. We are being very open to the public.
I think
Go ahead, Jane.
Yes, I think an important point that I just wanted you to highlight for our listeners. We know that this first stage will for sure end in a referendum, as is constitutionally required. And you mentioned while you were speaking that we would go through our regular voting process. This means to participate, you must be registered to vote, right?
Yes. That's very important.
Yes.
You cannot vote if you're not registered.
Can you vote with an expired ID?
I'm not aware of that, Ms. Jackson.
This matter came up for the last general election, which is why I'm asking during COVID.
Well, I can simply outline the process for you. I would also recommend that any questions you have, you contact the Electoral Office of Jamaica. There is a clear process that has been defined, which I can share if it is that you have sufficient time.
No,
but I would recommend that you contact the members of the public contact the EOJ. Now, of course, you have to be 18 years or over and resident in Jamaica, or a Commonwealth citizen 18 years or older who is a resident in Jamaica at the date of registration, and who have been a resident for at least 12 months prior to the date of registration. It is important that you are not subjected to any legal incapacity to vote. For example, being of unsound mind, you're convicted, or under a suspended sentence. So let me just summarize quickly. You should visit your constituency office. To the best of my knowledge, those offices are open at 8:30 and close at 4:30 Mondays to Thursdays, and 8:30 to 3:30 on Fridays. If you just turned 18, you may be asked to show proof of age. So it is very important that you bring your birth certificate with you. With respect to step 2, the personal data collected at the office, the registration clerk will assist you in completing your registration record card, also known as the RRC. And of course, this form is used to record the elector's demographic information, photograph, and fingerprints in terms of step 3, residence verification. After you have filled out the application, EOJ representatives and scrutineers, that includes political party representatives, of course, will visit your residence at a later date to verify the address you gave. And so, very importantly, I must highlight that the registration process is not complete until your residence has been verified. Very important. With respect to step 4, awaiting processing, once your address has been verified, your application is processed, your information is verified for accuracy, and your fingerprints are cross-matched to ensure that there are no duplications. And in respect of ID cards being issued at step 5, when the registration process is complete, your name is added to the voters list and your ID card will be subsequently issued, but only after the voters list has been published. Depending on when you register, this may be May 31st, which has passed, and November 30th, which is to come.
Great.
Alright.
Thank you so much, Pace. Just last word from you as we close out. What you want to say to the listeners?
Let me first of all thank you, Ms. Jackson, and your team for JFJ and Bridge FM for inviting me in particular, because I'm a representative not just of the ministry but the Constitutional Reform Committee, to speak to wider Jamaica about this very important process. As I have always said, this is a momentous journey on which we have embarked. We need to hold our hands, each other's hands, along this journey. And I want to also implore all stakeholders to let us work together harmoniously. Yes, there will be differences, but please let us, if there are concerns, simply contact us directly rather than take to the media. We're asking you to hold us accountable, but let us have dialogue. And come before the committee and make your submissions in terms of what the new constitution should encompass. We want to hear from you. I know you have promised, Ms. Jackson. I look forward to you appearing before the Constitutional Reform Committee. So let me thank you and your team for this opportunity to educate all Jamaicans on this very, very important process. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Permanent Secretary Wayne Robertson. We certainly appreciate you and the work of the minister, who sometimes I tell her she looks so tired. So I really know she's working hard on this process.
We have a very hardworking and
yes.
minister who is very hands-on as well.
Yes.
And so
to the wider Constitutional Reform Committee.
So it's good that I am taking off some of the load of her back today.
Yes.
I'm sure.
But thank you and have a good Tuesday. And we have to take the break.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And the same to you and to all Jamaicans, of course.
We are in our closing 10 minutes of the show. And I know we had some other topics we wanted to highlight, but we just had a great conversation with Permanent Secretary Wayne Robertson from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs on our constitutional reform process. So if you missed anything, be sure to check out our YouTube so you can recap this episode where we got some very good information on how to participate in the process as citizens. Mikkel?
Yeah, I see some questions coming in from human rights advocate Susan Goff on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So Ms. Goff, we're going to be posing those questions to the Permanent Secretary privately and then sharing those feedback once received on the social media platforms. So quickly, the questions entail the CRC meetings. Other than the submissions, will those be broadcasted live? Mm-hmm. What is the link to the recordings of previously broadcasted meetings? And when will the outstanding CRC meeting minutes be posted online? I know Ms. Goff also tagged the ministry's social media handle, but if we receive the answers before the ministry shares it, then we will share those on our platform. Yeah. There's a little booklet here for those who can't see. Jade, is it clear?
It is clear-ish. bring it to your left.
Which side is my left now? Over this now?
No, the other one. Your other left.
No, you see, because I'm seeing it in reverse. We're seeing the book.
Yes, they're seeing it now.
Now, this is a little booklet that JFJ developed last year. It's called Know Your Rights. the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms made simple.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is not a PR plug. This is actually an educational booklet. Maybe we should do better PR, but just to say this is an educational booklet for Jamaicans. Because of the printing cost associated with it, we have to take a small contribution. But in this booklet, 52 pages, and I think the 52 includes the cover. So it's actually less for those who don't like to read. It's half a letter size folded in two, or half a letter size folded in two.
Yes.
It entails understanding the structure of the state, the conversation we had just now about the roles and function of the Governor General and other things. It's an important read because we have to be educated. I know we're running out of time, but I want to quickly say to those who ask the bread and butter question, we're replacing the monarchy after with me and how me go about my business every single day. You heard about the powers vested in the Governor General, but it's also a matter of national pride and dignity given our history. So I just wanted to put that in context. The last time we had a referendum was in 1958, I believe, when we got rid of the West Indies Federation. So again, put things in context, important as we talk about true independence and sovereignty for our country. Now, into the topic that we wanted to discuss, Jade.
Yes.
We touched on it last week, the matter of sexual offenses, and we're going to be touching on it every single week. And, you know, one of the disappointments we had is that we heard public officials saying, for example, that the matter of buggery, which is a savings law provision in our constitution, won't be touched. Why are we challenging that position from the public officials? A couple years ago, when we made our recommendations to Parliament to have the definition of rape defined, before I make that comment, just to put in context, rape in law only means that females can be raped.
Yes,
Because
and
it
only men
defines
can
it as-
be perpetrators.
Absolutely. So it means that men and boys cannot be raped in law. It also means that if a female, including a child, were to be forcibly penetrated in the anus, then that is not seen as rape. Several organizations said to the government of Jamaica across administrations that this needs to change. The Joint Select Committee reviewing the Sexual Offences Act unfortunately said, we won't touch on this matter because to touch on this matter means touching on the buggery law. And to touch on the buggery law, in our estimation, needs to go to a referendum, keeping in mind that there is no legal requirement for it to actually go to a referendum. So when we see several instances last week of young boys, young children being forcibly penetrated in the anus, and then the perpetrators being charged with buggery, which carries a maximum 10 years imprisonment, compared to rape, which carries up to life imprisonment, we're saying to the Parliament that political will is important because we can't shy away from this thing. We have to be careful and we have to demonstrate that we're protecting the most vulnerable. So we're appealing to Parliament. And no, Jade, you made some posts on JFJ's behalf last week. So if you could just refresh the listeners what that post entailed.
Yes, so we spoke directly to Prime Minister Holness. We also mentioned a couple of critics, including Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, as well as Sir Nesta. We had to mention them as they would have indicated that this would not be an issue that is considered in the constitutional reform process. And the gist of our thread was that, one, we do not need a referendum constitutionally to consider this issue. It can be amended by a 2/3 majority like any other provision. And two, that it is absolutely necessary that we do so, as we have completely excluded several vulnerable persons in our society from adequate protection. And when we talk about our right to equality before the law under the Constitution, this is a right that's being breached by the perpetuation of these provisions, as it means that some victims of sexual violence will not be equal before the law as other victims of sexual violence. And I'm sure as we as citizens are outraged by the headlines, we identify that these are equal offenses that should be treated
4-year-old
equally.
Jade.
No,
4-year-old.
absolutely. And the challenge too is that a judge cannot increase the sentence if there are no further offenses to have added actual time to the instance. So the fact that this victim was 4 years old and had such a heinous act committed against them cannot affect the power that the court has. So the court will not be able to give more than a 10-year sentence for this, no matter how egregious it is. So we really do need to look at how we are protecting some of our most vulnerable children in particular.
Yeah, thank you, Jade, because I don't think we can be so caught up in homophobia
Absolutely.
that we are failing as a society to deal with the issues. I don't think the judges should be there scouring through the law to see what I can use to pad up the sentencing for a perpetrator. So again, we're appealing to both the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition that political will, what's the word I'm looking for? Some strength,
Yes.
some the opposite of being a coward. I'm sorry, I can't think of a better word at the moment. But we need to show that we're really protecting those who are most vulnerable in society. So anyway, we're at the end of the show. So over to you, Jade, with your trivia. Your bright people on Instagram, I see.
Them answer, but nobody is, and I hope they're listening. Nobody has looked to see if they are looking at the correct version of the Constitution. And the section that you have all placed is incorrect. Please continue to look for an amended version of the Constitution. They're all online. I know there's a copy on the Ministry of Justice's website. Please look for the amended version of the Constitution and give us the correct answer. So we don't have our winners yet, but we will look out for our winner at the end of today. I just want to plug quickly in 2 seconds. We have our final stop on our Mega Mart store tour or GBV tour this Thursday at the Mega Mart Waterloo, so you can come and join us and get some information on our services and our gender-based violence response. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy Specialist.
And I'm Michael Jackson, Executive Director.
And we'll see you next week at the same time.
Thank you.